The billionaire spent every Christmas alone, until the new cleaner made an invitation that changed everything. The mansion stood like a monument to silence. Tall windows overlooked snow-covered grounds, untouched by footprints. Inside, everything gleamed. Polished wood floors, cold marble counters, furniture too expensive to ever be used. But it was the silence that made it feel truly lifeless. Matthew Collins sat in his study, swirling a glass of untouched brandy in his hand, staring at the fire that crackled without warmth. It was December 24th, again. Another year, another Christmas, another day without Elena. 25 years. A quarter century had passed since the hospital called, since they said his wife had gone into labor early, since they told him something had gone wrong, since the words, "we lost them," shattered his world. First Elena, then the baby. A daughter, they said, gone before he could even hold her. Since then, Matthew had become a ghost in his own life. He buried himself in work, built a financial empire, filled his home with things, but never with people. The holidays came and went, but he stopped celebrating them long ago. They were just reminders now, cold, glittering reminders of what he had lost. He glanced at the ornate grandfather clock in the hallway. Noon. The new cleaning service had said someone would arrive today, which irritated him. Who scheduled someone on Christmas Eve? He'd nearly cancelled, but decided he didn't care. Let them clean, let them come and go. A soft knock at the front door broke the quiet. Matthew didn't move. A few seconds later, the knock came again, still gentle, but more insistent. He rose, annoyed, and opened the door. A young woman stood there, bundled in a worn coat, her cheeks red from the cold, her brown eyes bright and curious. She held a small tote bag and a clipboard. "Hi, you must be Mr. Collins," she said cheerfully. "I'm Gabriella from Blue Pine Cleaning." He nodded stiffly. "You're early." She shrugged. "Traffic was light. Plus I like to beat the snow when I can. Looks like we're getting more tonight." He didn't reply, just stepped aside and motioned for her to come in. She wiped her boots respectfully and entered, gazing around the massive foyer with undisguised awe. "Wow," she murmured. "This place is incredible. Feels like something out of a movie." Matthew gave a tight smile. "Try not to break anything." Gabriella laughed softly. "I'll do my best, sir." As she moved through the house, pulling out supplies, humming to herself, Matthew returned to the study, but found himself listening. Her footsteps were light, her presence oddly comforting. She didn't move like the others who'd come before, silent, invisible, scared of his mood. Gabriella seemed unaffected, open, human. When she passed the doorway, dusting a nearby cabinet, she paused. "Excuse me," she said, peeking into the study. "Do you want me to handle this room today or leave it?" He looked up. "You can do it." She stepped in, careful not to touch anything too quickly. "Do you spend a lot of time in here?" "Yes." "It's nice. Feels like it has a soul." Matthew raised an eyebrow. "It's wood and leather and stone. Not sure how soulful it is." Gabriella smiled as she dusted a shelf. "I think it's about the feeling it gives off. Some rooms feel empty, others feel lived in. This one feels watched over." He said nothing, but his eyes lingered on a framed photograph beside the fireplace. Eleanor, 8 months pregnant, smiling in the autumn sun. Gabriella followed his gaze, then looked back quickly. "She's beautiful." Matthew's jaw tightened. "You're here to clean, not to ask questions." "I wasn't asking," she said gently, "just noticing." The silence hung heavier this time. Gabriella turned back to her work, not flustered, not rushing. 10 minutes passed before she spoke again. "Do you have any plans for tomorrow?" she asked, her tone light. He looked up, annoyed. "What? Christmas? Dinner? Company?" "No." She paused, then smiled. "Well, my mum makes way too much food every year, and she'd kill me if I didn't ask. You're welcome to join us. It's not fancy, just family, food, and way too many desserts." Matthew stared at her. "You're inviting me to your Christmas dinner?" "Yeah, why not?" He blinked. "You don't even know me." "Sure I do. You're Mr. Collins. You live in a castle and drink brandy at noon." she said with a smirk. "But you've also been very polite, and you look like someone who might need a chair at a crowded table." Matthew almost laughed. "Almost. You think I'm the type of man who accepts dinner invitations from strangers?" Gabriella shrugged. "Maybe not. But maybe you're the type of man who could surprise himself." And just like that, she moved on, humming again, vacuuming the hallway like she hadn't just thrown a stone into still water. Matthew sat there for a long time, staring at the fire. That night, after she left, he walked through the house as if seeing it for the first time. So much space, so many rooms, all of them perfectly clean, all of them painfully empty. He wandered into the kitchen and stood by the window, watching snow fall beneath a distant street lamp. The world looked so quiet out there, peaceful, almost warm. He thought about Gabriella's face, the easy way she smiled, the way her eyes didn't flinch from his, the way her invitation hadn't felt like charity, but like something honest, like something needed. He picked up the brandy again, then set it back down. The phone on the counter buzzed. A message. From an unknown number. "Dinner starts at 6. If you change your mind, we'd love to have you. Gabriella." Matthew stared at the screen. He should say no. He should delete it. Instead, he typed, "What's the address?" and hit send. The directions led him to a quiet cul-de-sac in a working-class neighborhood, far from the gated streets and private driveways of Matthew's world. The houses here weren't large or flashy, but they were alive. Glowing windows, strings of mismatched lights, the smell of wood smoke and cinnamon drifting faintly through the air. Matthew parked his sleek black car by the curb and stared at the modest two-story house before him. White siding, a crooked snowman on the lawn, kids' drawings taped to the front window, warmth practically seeped from the walls. For a moment, he sat motionless. What was he doing here? Then he remembered her voice. "You look like someone who might need a chair at a crowded table." He stepped out of the car. The front door opened before he could knock. "Hey, you made it!" Gabriella grinned, her curls pulled back in a loose ponytail, a smudge of flour on her cheek. "Come in before you freeze to death." The heat inside hit him like a hug. Music played softly from an old stereo. The smell of garlic bread, roasted meat, and something sweet filled the air. Laughter came from a room down the hall, followed by a child's shriek of delight. He hadn't heard a house sound like this in years. Gabriella took his coat with practiced ease. "We're just finishing up dinner. You okay with sitting at the big table? It gets loud." "I'll manage," Matthew said, glancing around. The living room was cluttered, but in a way that spoke of life, not neglect. Stockings hung on the mantel. Framed photos lined the shelves, family portraits, vacations, school pictures. He froze at one. It was an old photo, faded, almost 30 years old by the look of it. A young woman in a nurse's uniform holding a baby swaddled in a pink blanket. The woman looked familiar. Not exactly, but something in her eyes stirred memory. Gabriella noticed him staring. "That's my mum," she said. "Margaret Morgan. She was a nurse forever. That baby's me, apparently. I don't remember, obviously." Matthew's breath caught. "She took that photo the day she brought me home," Gabriella added. "She says I was the tiniest baby she ever saw." Before he could respond, a voice called out, "Gabs, who's your friend?" Mrs. Margaret Morgan appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. She was in her late 60s, her grey hair pulled back, eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. When she saw Matthew, she stopped. Just for a second. Then she smiled. "You must be Mr. Collins." He nodded politely. "Matthew, thank you for having me." Mrs. Morgan approached, offering a hand. Her grip was strong, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Gabriella didn't tell me much, just that you'd be joining us." "It was a spontaneous invitation," he said. Her gaze lingered on him a beat too long. "Well, we're happy to have you. Dinner's almost ready. Make yourself at home." Gabriella led him into the dining room, where a long wooden table had been set for far more people than he expected. At least 10 chairs, some mismatched. Half were already filled by cousins, uncles, and neighbors. Everyone was talking over each other, passing dishes, pouring drinks. It was chaos, warm, beautiful chaos. Matthew took a seat near the end, feeling oddly like a statue at a parade. "Uncle Lou," Gabriella called, laughing as she dodged a flying napkin. "This is Matthew. Be nice, he's new." "Welcome to the zoo," Lou grinned, raising his glass. "Hope you're hungry." He was. More than he realized. Plates were passed. Stories were shared. Someone brought out homemade cranberry sauce that tasted like nothing he'd ever had in his life. He didn't speak much, but he listened. Really listened. Laughter bubbled in his chest once or twice. Once, he caught Gabriella watching him. She didn't look away. At some point during dessert, he slipped into the kitchen to refill his water. The room was dim, quiet. The stereo played a Christmas song he hadn't heard in years. Something from when he was a child. Then he heard them. Two voices, low and tense. Gabriella. "Why are you acting so weird?" Mrs. Morgan. "I didn't expect him to come." Gabriella. "It's just dinner." Mrs. Morgan. "You don't understand. He doesn't know. Not yet." Gabriella. "Know what?" Mrs. Morgan hesitated. "We were told she died." Matthew froze behind the doorframe. "She?" Gabriella asked. Mrs. Morgan sighed. "It's not the time. We'll talk later." The refrigerator door opened. Footsteps. The conversation stopped. Matthew stepped back, silent. He returned to the table as if nothing had happened, but something inside him had shifted. The food no longer tasted the same. The voices around him grew distant. What had he just heard? He looked at Gabriella, at the curve of her jaw, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, the same gesture Eleanor used to make when she was nervous. Then, later, as the night wore down and coats were gathered, he heard it again, faint, coming from the hallway. Mrs. Morgan was humming as she cleaned up plates. The melody. He hadn't heard that lullaby in 25 years. Eleanor used to hum it to the baby bump every night. Matthew's heart thudded in his chest. Couldn't be. Couldn't possibly be. But the photo. The lullaby. The way Mrs. Morgan had looked at him. The strange comment. "We were told she died." Gabriella came up beside him, smiling. "Hey, you okay? You've gone kinda pale." He looked at her, really looked. "I'm fine," he said, barely above a whisper. But he wasn't. Something was very, very wrong. Or maybe something was finally, painfully, becoming right. The night after the dinner, sleep wouldn't come. Matthew lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling as shadows crawled across the walls, shaped by the soft light from the fireplace. Every time he closed his eyes, the pieces returned. Gabriella's face, the lullaby, the photograph, the words whispered in the kitchen. "He doesn't know. Not yet. We were told she died." It clawed at his mind like a riddle too cruel to solve. By morning, he was still awake. Snow had begun to fall again, a steady curtain of white drifting over the landscape. The world looked clean, untouched. But inside, Matthew felt like everything was unraveling. He didn't go into the office. He didn't return calls. Instead, he paced, replayed every detail, the timeline, the hospital, Elena's death, the nurses, the confusion. There had been one nurse who'd taken the baby away. He remembered the panic, the doctors saying the child was stillborn, that he should be with Elena's body, that nothing could be done. No second opinion, no chance to hold her, just paperwork and grief and silence. Until now. That afternoon, he returned to Gabriella's neighborhood, uninvited, unannounced. He parked down the block and sat in the car until he saw Gabriella leave the house, coat on, earbuds in, walking toward the bus stop with a bag over her shoulder. He waited until she was out of sight. Then he approached the house and knocked. Mrs. Morgan opened the door, startled. Her smile faded the moment she saw his face. "We need to talk," Matthew said. She stepped aside silently, and he entered. The warmth of yesterday had vanished. The house was quieter, emptier. The hum of the heater was the only sound. She led him to the kitchen, poured him tea without asking. Her hands trembled just enough for him to notice. "I know what you overheard," she said finally. Matthew didn't sit. "Then you know why I'm here." She nodded. There was a long pause. The snow whispered against the window. "I worked at St. Joseph's," she began. "Maternity ward, 25 years ago. I was there the night your wife came in." He stayed silent, jaw clenched. "I remember her," she continued. "Elena, she was so kind, scared but strong. She was in distress. They rushed her into surgery." Matthew swallowed hard. "They told me she didn't make it, and the baby, my daughter, was stillborn." Mrs. Morgan closed her eyes. "That's what they told me too, at first." "At first?" he echoed. "I was called into post-op. One of the nurses handed me the infant, said she'd passed, told me to take her to the holding room. But when I checked her vitals, I saw she was breathing, weak, barely, but alive." Matthew gripped the back of the kitchen chair, knuckles white. "I tried to tell someone," Mrs. Morgan said, voice shaking. "But the doctor in charge, he shut me down, said I was mistaken, that the baby had already been pronounced dead, told me to let it go." "Why?" Matthew's voice cracked. "Why would they say that?" "I don't know," she whispered. "I've asked myself that for 25 years. Maybe it was panic. Maybe it was negligence. Maybe someone didn't want a lawsuit. I don't know." She looked up at him, eyes filled with quiet horror. "All I knew was that there was a baby who needed someone, and a father who never came." Matthew stepped back, stunned. "I didn't know," he said, almost to himself. "No one told me." "I tried," she said. "I filed an anonymous letter, years later, but I don't think it ever reached you. And by then, I was raising her. She was thriving, sweet and strong and full of light. I couldn't bear to disrupt her life or yours. I didn't know how. So you just kept her," he said, eyes burning. "I raised her," Mrs. Morgan corrected, her voice firmer now. "I gave her everything I could. I never planned it. I never thought it would go this far, but once I had her, I couldn't let her go. She was my second chance, too." Matthew turned away, staring out the window. The street looked the same as it had the day before, but everything had changed. "She's my daughter," he said quietly. "I missed everything. Her first steps, her first words, every birthday, every Christmas." "I know." His voice broke. She was all I had left of Elena. Silence stretched between them like an ocean. Mrs. Morgan moved closer. "I didn't steal her. I saved her. But I know that doesn't make this right." He turned to face her, grief and fury warring in his expression. But there was no enemy here, no villain, just time, just loss. "You should have told me," he said. "I was afraid," she said simply. "Afraid you'd take her, that I'd lose her, and by the time she was old enough to understand, I didn't know how to begin." Matthew sat down at the table, the weight of it all crashing down at once. "She doesn't know?" he asked. Mrs. Morgan shook her head. "Not a word. To her, I'm just her mum, and you're a nice man who came to dinner." He laughed bitterly. "A nice man? Then what do I do?" Mrs. Morgan didn't answer at first. Then she said softly, "You have a choice. You can tell her now, or wait, but either way the truth will come out. She deserves to know. And so do you." Matthew stared down at his hands. "I don't even know who I am anymore," he whispered. "I built my life around a lie I didn't know existed, and now I've found her. But I don't know how to reach her." "She's more like you than you think," Mrs. Morgan said, her voice gentler now. "Stubborn, fierce but kind. If you speak to her with your heart, she'll listen." He looked up, eyes wet. "How do you recover 25 years?" "You don't," she said. "You start with one honest moment, and then the next." He nodded slowly, then stood. "I want to tell her," he said, "but not like this, not in shock. I need to know her first, as a person, not just as a truth." Mrs. Morgan looked relieved. "That's fair." He walked to the door, paused. "Thank you," he said, voice heavy with everything words couldn't carry. She nodded. "Be good to her." "I will." Outside, the snow had thickened. The world was white and silent again, But for the first time in 25 years, Matthew Collins didn't feel entirely lost in it. 2 days had passed since the truth shattered Matthew's world and rebuilt it in a way he never imagined. He'd returned to his mansion, but it no longer felt like a refuge, more like a shell. Every room echoed louder. Every silence had weight. And for once, he didn't want to be alone with it. He spent most of those 2 days in the conservatory, a space filled with plants he never cared for until now. Somewhere among the vines and filtered sunlight, he rehearsed the words he wanted to say, over and over. But no version of the truth ever sounded quite right. Because how do you tell someone they were never meant to be a stranger to you? On the evening of the 27th, he sent a message. Are you free to meet? I'd like to talk. No pressure. Just coffee. On me. Gabriella responded 20 minutes later. Sure. There's a spot I like. Nothing fancy. The coffee shop was a small corner cafe tucked between a bookstore and a florist, the kind of place with handwritten signs and worn wooden floors. When he arrived, she was already there, reading, one leg tucked beneath her, a cup of something steaming in her hands. She looked up and smiled, not brightly, but warmly. I wasn't sure you'd show, she said. I wasn't either, he admitted, taking the seat across from her. For a moment they just sat in quiet, the clink of mugs and the low murmur of other patrons filling the space. Then Matthew asked, Can I ask you something strange? Gabriella raised an eyebrow. Stranger than inviting yourself to Christmas dinner with a family of strangers. He almost smiled. Fair point. He paused, then asked, What does Christmas mean to you? She leaned back, a little caught off guard. That is strange, but okay. She tapped her cup thoughtfully. I guess Christmas for me was always about noise, togetherness, Mom going overboard in the kitchen, people you didn't expect showing up, cousins fighting over board games, laughing until your stomach hurts. She looked at him. But deeper than that, it's about belonging. No matter how messy or weird or different things are, you're part of something. You have a place at the table. Matthew swallowed. Even unexpected guests. Especially them, she said. The silence stretched again. Then he said carefully, There's something I need to tell you. Something that changes everything. Gabriella's expression sobered. She set her mug down. Okay. He took a breath. I knew your mother, Elena. A long time ago, Gabriella frowned. Elena? She was my wife. 25 years ago. She died during childbirth. They told me the baby died too. Gabriella went still. Matthew's voice shook. But they were wrong. The baby lived, and someone took her in, raised her, loved her. Her eyes widened. Wait. You, he said. It was you. Gabriella stared at him, color draining from her face. No, she said. That can't be. I didn't know, Matthew said quickly. Not until the dinner. Not until your mother told me. She worked at the hospital that night. She thought you were abandoned. She tried to find me, but she was scared. She raised you. And I missed everything. Gabriella stood up suddenly, stepping away from the table. She paced, arms crossed, breathing shallow. You're saying you're my father? She asked. He nodded, standing too. I'm saying I should have been. I am, and I'm sorry. She stared at him, eyes glassy with shock and something sharper underneath. You expect me to just believe this? After one dinner? No, he said gently. I don't expect anything. I just needed you to know. She turned away, hands gripping the back of a chair. This is insane. I agree. But it explains so much, she whispered. The look in Mum's eyes, the way you looked at me, that weird energy, the lullaby. She turned back, eyes now wet. She never told me, not once. She thought she was protecting you, and maybe in her own way she was. But I wasn't given a choice, and neither were you. Silence again. Then, softly, Gabriella said, I don't know what to feel. You don't have to feel anything yet, Matthew said. You don't owe me anything. I just want a chance to know you if you'll let me. Gabriella sat back down, slowly. "So, now what?" she asked. "I don't know," he admitted. "We talk, we meet. Maybe we spend another Christmas together. This time not as strangers." She looked at him, eyes searching. "I don't know how to be someone's daughter," she said. "I don't know how to be someone's father," he replied. A pause. "Good," she said quietly. "Then we can mess it up together." A tear rolled down her cheek and she laughed softly, wiping it away. He laughed too, the first real one in years. They both sat in that tiny cafe, surrounded by strangers, somehow less alone than they had been all month. Later that week, Gabriella invited him back for leftovers. The same table, the same clutter. Only this time, the seat beside her was his. They didn't make a speech. They didn't announce the truth. They just sat and ate and listened, as if making space for something new. At one point, Gabriella raised her glass and clinked his gently. "Merry Christmas," she said. Matthew smiled. "For the first time in a very long time. It really is."